Hi, this is Ron Stites. I'm going to talk to you about a presentation that I gave to Brighton Business Builders back in September of 2016. Brighton Business Builders is a small group of entrepreneurs in Brighton, Colorado that get together weekly to talk about issues like this and how to grow their business, make their business profitable and sustainable. Neat little group. And this is a presentation I gave to them at one of their weekly breakfast meetings. The topic for today is there a war on small business? Of course, politicians brag about small business all the time, how they support it. And they give a lot of reasons why that should be. It's a major source of economic growth, certainly an important method of social and economic mobility as people start new businesses, grow their businesses, take their businesses to new locations. It's also an important method for the redistribution of wealth, starting with very little and growing to something big. It's also a way to distribute economic and political power. It is a very broad base of folks who are involved in small business, from minority startups to backwoods hobbies that have grown into good-sized businesses. What's interesting is that small business is actually more apt to be engaged in social and ethical issues than a lot of bigger businesses. Entrepreneurs view their businesses as an extension of themselves and who they really are. Okay, so those were the political talking points, but really, do these programs and organizations really help small business, or are they a major hindrance, a major barrier to entry and growth? Programs and groups like EPA, OSHA, IRS, the National Labor Relations Board, there are many examples where small businesses run afoul of some of these very difficult, complex regulations and costly regulations. One of the most recent, of course, is the Affordable Care Act. The idea behind that was to make healthcare portable and presumably actually help that economic mobility. But does it really? Maybe the pain of these programs are worth the cost, but could there be some nefarious motives? So with all these stated advantages for small business, why would government think about being at war with small business? Well, it turns out progressive thinkers, especially in universities, have long talked about the difficulties in engineering a society when it is dominated by small business. It becomes too hard, too expensive to regulate and control those businesses or tax those businesses. Those diffuse small businesses compete for credit, making it more difficult to supply the credit and control how it's used. Furthermore, small businesses are well known for their social and ethical agendas that are an expression of individuals and individual viewpoints, not necessarily the politically correct viewpoint. These thinkers often look at the private sector and the public sector as actually being in competition. So there are some thinkers that have long thought about what we need to do is consolidate, concentrate, and centralize and make things public. But do we have concrete examples of this kind of social engineering? Libertarian John Stossel seems to think so. He ran this program in 2014.
At this shooting range in Maryland, everyone's shooting bullets made by an ammunition company called Tomcat, including the last shooter you saw, Kat O'Connor. She owns the company, and she's here with Brian Wise, who runs a group called U.S. Consumers Coalition. Both are upset by a secretive project from control freaks in Washington called Operation Choke Point. So, Brian, what's that?
It's a program that the Department of Justice is pursuing that essentially intimidates banks and payment processors to stop doing business with industries that they fundamentally don't like. And people like Cat are being affected and losing the ability to provide their services and their products to
Bad
consumers.
industries like Cat makes ammunition.
That's right.
Companies that say, as seen on TV, I have this list that got leaked from the Department of Justice. They didn't want to reveal this. Firearms makers, payday loan sellers, pornography, surveillance equipment, tobacco sales, lots of companies.
They didn't want this program to be released, as you mentioned, to the public at all. But most of these industries are industries that they've tried to legislate out of existence over the past 20 or 30 years. They haven't been able to do that. And so the Obama administration, under the direction of Eric Holder at the Department of Justice, has decided we're going to come up with a creative way to go after these industries. We're going to find the one unifying factor that brings together all of these industries. And what is that? Everyone needs a bank. Everyone needs a payment processor. And so we're going to go to the banks. We're going to intimidate them into stopping their client relationships with all of these companies.
So, Kat, how did you find out you'd been choked by Operation Choke Point?
We were told twice by payment processors that we were rejected due to our industry. That was pretty much the only explanation that we were given.
You suddenly found you couldn't use your PayPal account.
We could not use PayPal Business Pro, which is the credit card processing that links to your website. They would not allow us to, they would not approve our application.
So you then tried to open a bank account, and the bank said?
I was told by the branch manager, you can have your bank account, but you can't have gateway services due to your industry.
So was Stossel just another of those conspiracy theorists? In this case, probably not. Congress took this seriously and pressured FDIC to put an end to that list of high-risk businesses. In fact, that list included 31 different types of businesses. And so in January 2015, Operation Choke Point really ceased to exist, at least seemed to. It's not certain that the whole concept of targeting is gone. There are still examples that we see. We have to be aware that these kinds of things do happen and have to be diligent and watching for them. That brings me to my final wrap-up of this, what to do about it. One approach is sort of that conservative political approach of smaller government, less regulation, lower taxes. As a package, that's really not selling. We are accustomed to antagonistic relationships between our government regulatory agencies and our businesses. That's established in our culture and in our law. Furthermore, there's actual money in that regulatory conflict. This approach of just trying to reduce regulations isn't going to work. It's not acceptable in today's culture. We are going to live with more regulation and higher costs. They're here to stay. So what can be done to help small business in this new environment? I think we find ourselves in a situation not unlike the United Kingdom in a post-war World War II environment. They began to really struggle with affording their public policies. I think just like in the UK, the Chamber of Commerce is in a key position to help preserve and expand and improve small business. Members of our chambers need to be aware of these kinds of issues. They need to get some training on all those regulations and barriers that are out there. They're not going to go away. We've got to make our members aware of them. Furthermore, our chambers need to provide resources so that small business has an opportunity to overcome all those barriers, to comply with good regulations at a reasonable cost to themselves. This is where we also need concerted political action so that we do have smart regulations, not dumb ones. We continue to improve our regulations so they do what we want them to do while minimizing any unintended consequences. And we need to reduce the cost of compliance so there just is generally more compliance. And finally, our chambers need to have a continuous, concerted outreach to train the public on the social benefits of small business, the personal opportunities that small business brings to especially younger people, and the political necessity of having small business. If we think that chambers cannot be active in policy making in the political process, we are sadly mistaken. Politics is everything today. I pose just a few questions to this group and any other Chamber of Commerce group that might be listening to this presentation. Are we answering the call? Internally, are we making our members aware? Are we providing training and resources? Externally, are we training the public in the position, the importance of small business? And are we taking the necessary political action to ensure that regulations are smart, not dumb, that actually give far more benefit than they cost? If not, what do we need to do? We need to ask that question. What do we need to do at Brighton Business Builders, at the Brighton Chamber, in North Denver, in the state of Colorado, across the U.S., and internationally? We are indeed the caretakers of the next generation. Now listen to a few words from former President Ronald Reagan.
The character and conscience of small business built this nation. You know, in his book, Wealth and Poverty, George Gilder wrote something about entrepreneurs that I've long believed. He said that most contribute far more to society than they ever recover, and most of them win no riches at all. They are the heroes of economic life, and those who begrudge them their rewards demonstrate a failure to understand their role and their promise. Well, wouldn't it be nice to hear a little more about the forgotten heroes of America, those who create most of our new jobs, like the owners of stores down the street, the faithfuls who support our churches, synagogues, schools, and communities, the brave men and women everywhere who produce our goods, feed a hungry world, and keep our families warm while they invest in the future to build a better America. That's where miracles are made, not in Washington, D.C. We hear so much about the greed of business. Well, frankly, I'd like to hear a little more about the courage, generosity, and creativity of business. I'd like to hear it pointed out that entrepreneurs don't have guaranteed annual incomes. Before they can turn a profit, they must anticipate and deliver what consumers want. They must risk their money with investments. The truth is, before entrepreneurs can take, they must give, and business begins with giving. And I believe business works best, creates the greatest wealth, and produces the most progress for all when we're free to follow the teachings of Scripture. Give, and you will be given unto. Search, and you will find. Cast your bread upon the waters, and it will return to you manyfold.
Again, this is Ron Stites. Thanks so much for watching my video.